We're back at Triple S. This is Stat 7 Sports, and I am Louisiana's Kuyon Kunas, or, as said before, the contained Kunas, and we just finished off the conference championship games where we get the Chiefs and 49ers. My initial pick on what was going to be the Super Bowl, and just how we got here to these games today. I'll start off with the early game with the Chiefs-Titans, just my whole interpretation of it. I watched these games closely. With this one, the Titans, just like last week with the Texans getting a big lead on the Chiefs, once again, Chiefs got into a big deficit, and the Titans controlled the game with more effort, with more work put in by Tannehill, and pretty much all of the stats so far in the first half by Henry. That was his stat line for pretty much the entire game. They barely used him at all in the second half because whenever they got in too big of an upset, they couldn't just keep running the ball. So they had to make Tannehill beat them. And at that point, when you're trying to go in a competition on who's going to score faster, who's going to score more efficiently by throwing the ball, if you got to pick Mahomes or Tannehill, everyone's picking Mahomes. Yes, Tannehill's been nice, but he threw for more yards in this game than he threw in the previous playoff games combined. But really in the first half, Tannehill was solid. Getting the ball downfield to A.J. Brown, actually getting him in space, that one thing they couldn't do in the first two games, to get the Patriots and the Ravens, and getting Jonnu Smith open in open space. And at that point, going into the latter part of the second quarter, the Titans ended up starting with a 10-0 lead. Also, another double-digit deficit for the Chiefs. And it seems like everything was going into the Chiefs' favor. For the Titans' momentum, as Titans were able to control the pace early on into the mid-second quarter. They doubled the Chiefs in time possession whenever it ended up being 17-7. Then Chiefs end up coming back with the touchdown, 20-yard pass to Tyreek Hill, and the play that deflated, I believe, the Titans for the rest of the game was that long scramble by Mahomes for a 27-yard run right before the half. That at that point they end up having to trail in the half, which would end up being the first touchdown they have given up this season inside of 2 minutes before a half. And for the fact that the Chiefs got the ball first in the second half, sure, nothing really happened too much in the second half. In the third quarter on it. But at the end of the third quarter, Chiefs are about to score again. And really at that point, they put the game out of reach. So Mahomes was able to take out some deep bombs to Sammy Watkins, to Tyreek Hill. And he was able to scramble whenever the coverage downfield was actually solid. Early on in the game, I do think that the linebackers for Titans actually contained the Chiefs' offense fairly well. Between Correa and Evans, you had Adoree Jackson's one of the few people who can actually keep up with Tyreek Hill because both of them are speedster track stars. Hill's actually less known because he went to West Alabama. But the Chiefs really just have too many weapons, and for most of the season, outside of a few select games, they can get away without having too much of a running game by anyone not named Patrick Mahomes. If Mahomes is the leading rusher, that you usually think that'd be a problem. But him having half of his yardage and be able to get out of pressure for even just like the 5-6 yard gains, the deflating ones where it's like the Titans were able to get some pressure on him, get him outside the pocket, and make it to where he couldn't throw downfield. Those ones that he's just able to scramble to the side out of bounds, those are just incredibly deflating for a defense. And between that going on, ended up leaving the wide receivers with more time to get open. Watkins caught a couple bombs. Tyreek Hill got a bomb. That the 20-yard touchdown pass plus the actually 2 touchdown passes. That little swing pass right up front technically counts as a passing touchdown, which I don't know how I feel about that, but Tannehill played solid, even though the last touchdown in the game was just it's closer than the game actually ended up being, because it was a late touchdown from Tannehill to Berkshire, I mean. And the Chiefs are going to end up outscoring anybody, except potentially their Super Bowl opponents, the San Francisco 49ers, where I thought there was no way that this game would have felt as lopsided as the previous matchup. The funny thing about it is that San Francisco scored 37 points in both games. And 49ers really had the chance to score more at times. But if I end up doubting Richard Sherman coming into the playoffs at all, yeah, I'm wrong. I was so wrong. Yes, Devontae Adams had that one deep bomb for like 60 yards that ended up leading to the first Green Bay touchdown, but that's all the way in the third quarter. And the entire first half was dominated by San Francisco, even more dominant than Week 12, where Rodgers couldn't throw. Rodgers barely threw for 100 yards. But just like with the Chiefs game, in the third quarter, actually even further on, even earlier on for the Packers, once the 49ers got to a big lead, the one big problem with the Packers is they have a knack of pretty much being a non-factor for an entire half, and this is the last game you want that to happen. They've had games against the Lions, the last game of the year, where they were trailing 17-0 at the half, and then end up coming back to win. They had games against the Vikings where they struggled first quarter into the second quarter, where that was a game where they had Cousins, but they didn't have a healthy Thielen. They didn't have Dalvin Cook. They didn't have Alexander Mattison. And if not, with a slow start by Rodgers and the fact that they had 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, and a Rodgers pick, if not for their defense completely shutting down Minnesota's offense that entire game, Minnesota could have potentially had the division crown. But this game, they made Rodgers try to play superhero ball in the second half, but they were down 27-0 at halftime. That was just too much of a deficit for them to come back on. And the fact for the entire game that the Green Bay defense, that pass defense has been solid for most of the year. Their run defense had shown cracks through different parts of the year. None more than this game. Holy hell. Raheem Mostert went off. It makes you feel like you're going back in the old days where you had running backs running the ball 30, 35 times in the game. Raheem Mostert ran for the most yards in San Francisco postseason history and the second most yards in NFL history behind Eric Dickerson. And he was pretty good. He was at least a pretty good running back. But Mostert was a guy who came out of nowhere, a former surfer. And this year he has jumped onto the scene, part of the 3 running back backfield rotation where sometimes it's Matt Breida, sometimes it's Tevin Coleman. This one, it's all Mostert. 29 carries, 220 yards, 4 touchdowns. There was at points when it felt like Madden numbers to where Mostert was averaging over 10 yards a carry for a decent part of this game. And until Green Bay basically sent everyone in to stop the run because they needed to limit the clock that the 49ers were taking from them to come back. Before that, that's where Mostert had that 10-plus yard per carry because he would consistently get 8 to 10 yards each time, and then he had a burst to him that he could find gaps inside the left tackle and left guard end up breaking big holes where he can end up zooming through, going in for 20 yards in a game. And the fact that they have some very strong blocking tight ends and receivers, going from Deebo Samuel, Emmanuel Sanders. They're not just receiving targets. And then George Kittle is one of the best blocking tight ends of the league. Yes, probably the best overall tight end. But in this game, 49ers got off to a big lead because Green Bay could not stop the run. Garoppolo had to throw 8 passes, which feels highly familiar with both of the previous wins for the Titans. That Tannehill didn't throw over 100 yards in either game. But I ended up listening to something earlier before the game that what would happen in the first quarter would end up affecting how this game would go. Who started out fast, who got the early momentum would end up deciding who would have controlled the game the entire time. That's kind of how it was. You had wide receiver reverses for Samuel. You had Mostert. They had a bunch of interesting formations where they would end up shifting the tight end over. They would shift the wide receiver over, make it seem like, oh, they're going to maybe do a tight end screen to Kittle, or they'll do a wide receiver reverse to Deebo Samuel, and then end up giving the ball to Mostert and get you 15 yards. In the second half, since Green Bay was selling out on the run, they made a point to where Rodgers had to just heave it down the field as much as possible, and the 49ers were giving up the short gains, the short passes. They were trying to bleed the clock out for them. And Rodgers' stats look better than they probably should. Like, yes, he has 2 interceptions. You can't blame him too much. He can blame on the first one. The second one, he just had to. At that point, they were down by 17. You gotta make a big play now. It was just under 2 minutes, so you have to try to get a touchdown now, or it's ball game like it happened. But the fact that early on the 49ers were consistently making it to where their offensive line was pushing through their D-line. They never got to a point where Green Bay could end up getting their pass rush going between the Smith brothers. And also the fact that Jair Alexander got hurt. The one bad news for the 49ers is that Tevin Coleman got hurt early with a shoulder injury, which really looked bad because he was down on the field for like 15 minutes. The good news for the 49ers, though, they have 2 weeks, and he did come back on the sideline, even though he was definitely resting that shoulder and wasn't using that arm at all. But back to the Packers, one thing that they had to be able to do early on to be able to stay in this game is get Aaron Jones running early and often so you don't have to put all the pressure on Rodgers. And coming into the year, a lot of the issues with the Packers, what we thought was going to be the problem, we thought that Rodgers was going to have to be playing superhero ball and throw the ball all the way down around the field. The problem with that this year is the fact that they had Devontae Adams and nobody else. They got away with that a lot of times in regular season with subpar competition. outside of playing the Vikings twice and or they played the 49ers, for the most part, they got to avoid all the playoff teams. And whenever they didn't, the few games that they actually didn't have their top target, some of their younger targets between Kumaro, Allison, and Lazard, they were able to get more into the offense. But whenever you get into more difficult competition, they're going to have to be bigger targets, and they just couldn't provide the spark that they needed. Whenever you had Aaron Jones needing to go for a big game on this for Green Bay to stay competitive, he only ended up getting 12 carries on the game. It ended up being such a mismatch for a run to pass because Rodgers just had to go back and try to get points at bulk, which how he bulked up his stats at the very end. But this was a dominant performance by the 49ers, well-deserved. And now you have your Super Bowl. The best offense against the best defense, not named the Patriots, off statistics. And Mahomes happily did not have to deal with the Patriots this time because that's who kept him out of the Super Bowl last year. Now, Super Bowl 54 is going to be in Miami. I would have found it actually kind of funny if Tennessee would end up if Tennessee would have ended up winning that game, for the fact that I did see in the stands one person in a Tannehill jersey for the Dolphins. And if Tannehill would have won this game, he could have gone play in his old locker rooms in Miami. And that would have been another story. Or you could have had, potentially, Chiefs-Packers, where, it's the two State Farm agents. But then everyone would have got sick of all the State Farm commercials, and it's about Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl time, so the advertisements are going to go to the max. So it will have gotten out of control. Now, if you want after the game, I can go through some of the advertisements that go on off of it. I do understand the ads aren't as much quality as they were maybe like 5-10 years ago. But if y'all have interest for it, I can do that, a little small video on the side with that. Just let me know. But this is going to be a nice matchup between last year's MVP and the surprise team in the NFC. I don't know if they're really that much of a surprise, though, for the fact that the previous year, yes, they were 3-13, but they had Garoppolo get hurt very early in the season, to where they just had a couple backup quarterbacks that they had to use the rest of the season. So everyone knew that season was a wash. They probably would have been, I'm not going to say they were going to make the playoffs, but they were probably have been closer to 500 at that point. But it'll be a fun matchup on how is the San Francisco running game going to be able to match up against the Kansas City defense that has been a lot better for recent time, especially for the latter part of the year, and the fact that they held Derrick Henry, considered the top running back left, actually probably the top running back in the playoffs, to 3.9 yards a carry, which nobody could do. No one could get Derrick Henry under 100 yards, but Kansas City made Titans play. They made the Titans play catch-up most of the second half, so they really couldn't use Henry, as he's not much of a receiving back. But San Francisco has three backs, given if Coleman is healthy. There are 3 backs who are all very versatile and all have their own skill sets. And San Francisco may have one of the best secondaries in the league, where one thing about the 49ers, in both the matchups they've had to go against so far, there's only been really one guy that they've had to deal with in the receiving core. The 49ers had to deal with, for this one, Devontae Adams. Yes, you had for the Vikings game, they had Stephon Diggs taken off the field. Sherman took control of him. Sherman's going to be able to take one person off the field, although I don't know if he's going to be a good matchup to go against Tyreek Hill, their top guy, because Hill can just streak past them. I think he's probably going to end up getting stuck on, if it's Sammy Watkins, though, it's kind of the same thing. Sure, Hill's faster, but Watkins is also a streaker. But Kansas City may have to go another game without a running game to win, even with this one, because San Francisco's a strong front. They have a strong pass rush between dealing with Nick Bosa, dealing with DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, and having Quan Alexander backs, making that defense even better. But I'll give a preview on that in the near future. But I'm running a little long. But I'm going to let y'all go on this. Be prepared for another video in the near future. Please like and subscribe if y'all are interested in more. If you like this video, let anyone else know that might be interested in any sort of sports. For the most part, it's going to be something that's going to be based on usually either the national media or something Louisiana related, because I know that's the general audience. But with all that being said, this is Stat 7 Sports. I'm the Kunal Kunas. That's going to be a tongue twister for as long as I keep doing that. But I'll see y'all next time.